How's everybody doing today? So, obviously, I'm going to get back to covering these important Senate races in the build-up to the 2018 midterm elections. Now, for those of you who haven't seen my last couple of videos, a couple things I want to touch on really quick. I am using a new camera and recording rig setup, everything. Everything is different. Everything is new to me. So if there's any minor technical issues, I apologize ahead of time. Second thing, I am doing a giveaway for a $25 Google Play or Apple App Store gift card. I will have a link to the video in which you can enter that giveaway in the description for this video. Without further ado, though, let's talk about the New Jersey Senate race. Now, this is an interesting race, not because it's necessarily as tight or as much of a battleground state as a lot of the races that we've discussed up until now, but more because of recent developments in this race and also the narrative that this race holds. Because very much like we discussed races in the past, embodying the question of whether or not, Trump retains his support from 2016, whether or not people prefer traditional Republicans or outsider Republicans, and questions like that. This particular race has a very different type of narrative. And the question being asked in this race is as follows. What is more important to the American voters? The honesty of a politician or the political party of a politician? In this race, the incumbent candidate, Senator Robert Menendez, is running against a Republican challenger by the name of Bob. I'm going to be pronouncing it Hugin. I don't know if it's actually supposed to be Hugin or Hugin. I've heard it both ways. I really couldn't get a definitive answer, so Hugin seems to make more sense to me. That's how I'm going to be pronouncing it. If that's incorrect, I apologize ahead of time. Now, here's the thing. There are two interesting things about this race. First off, the question that I just framed. That being the question of, is it more important, or I guess you should say, would the American voters rather elect a candidate from their party who's corrupt, or may be corrupt, or would they rather elect a politician who's more likely to be honest and not corrupt, but from the opposing side? Now, a lot of times in American history, I think this would be a pretty simple and easy question to answer. But in this particular case, it is not so much, because we are in a very divided time in history, a time in which I think that a lot of voters, both Democrat and Republican alike, would vote in a child murderer if that person had the correct letter next to their name when they went on the news. And that's sad. That's not a good thing. But that is the way it is. And it's not something that is restricted to one side or the other. That divisiveness and extreme kind of nature exists on both the left and the right. I would say it makes up probably close to a quarter of the voters who are both definitely left-leaning and definitely right-leaning. So Robert Menendez, the incumbent senator, had a corruption case against him, which went to a mistrial verdict in late 2017. Now, there's some, clarity issues here because of some of the articles that I read. At first, it looked like a lot of these articles were saying that this was a more recent thing, but I think that it's pretty definitive to me that this actually occurred in 2017, and it's really just more being brought up to the forefront because of his re-election campaign. Not to say that something that happened 8 to 10 months ago is ancient history, but I mean, it's not like this happened 2 weeks ago, right? Now, when I say that this went to a mistrial, what happened is the jury was unable to reach a verdict of either guilty or not guilty, and therefore a mistrial was declared. Now, it was very clear that the Dems were kind of hanging back on actually officially announcing his re-election campaign until this trial was concluded, because within 24 hours of the mistrial being declared and him being free to return to his duties, pretty much every Democrat in the greater New Jersey area had publicly endorsed him, and he started a big slew of campaign ads and things like that, which his opponent had already been doing even prior to that. Now, here's the thing when we talk about a mistrial verdict. This is America, and you are innocent until proven guilty, right? But that's in the eyes of the law. We're talking about in the eyes of sane people. Now, there are a lot of cases I think that we can agree on, such as, here's something that I think a lot of you on the left can understand and agree with. There are certain particular cases of police violence that the police officer has been declared not guilty, not just a mistrial, but outright declared not guilty, where I think it's very clear to all of us that that person was in fact guilty, but in the eyes of the law, there wasn't enough evidence to convict them in an American court system. So here's the thing when it comes to Robert Menendez. The jury was not able to call him not guilty. And I think that the result of this case in either direction probably stems from how divided our politics are. There were probably at least a couple people, both right and left-leaning, in the jury who were either always going to declare him guilty or always going to declare him not guilty. But the fact that this went so far as to go to trial, we have seen so many examples of politicians doing shady stuff that gets nowhere near trial. The fact that this one went so far as to actually go to trial is a pretty good indicator that there was some shady crap going on, right? And as a result of this, despite the fact that New Jersey is a typically not staunchly, but a typically regularly Democratic state. Democrats tend to regularly win state elections in New Jersey, although they don't tend to regularly win in huge blowouts. Like they're not winning by like 24, 25 point margins, but they are regularly winning. The state does definitely lean left. The demographics of the state definitely lean left. So this would be pretty much an open and shut race were it not for this issue of corruption. And even in the lead up until recently, it did kind of look like it was an open and shut race. But recently things have started to change and shift to the favor of the Republican candidate. Now, he's still behind in the polls, but not nearly to the degree that he was a little while back. The aggregated polling result right now shows him down by 6 points, but that's compared to being down 17 points in polls in March. I'm going to go ahead and, as I have in other videos, read off the most recent poll results, with the caveat that I was only able to find 2 good poll results. I'm going to read you 4, but the last 2 are bizarre for different reasons. The Quinnipiac poll shows Menendez, the Democratic incumbent, ahead by 6 points, 43 to 37, and the Gravis poll shows Menendez ahead by 2 points, 43 to 41. Now, there are 2 other polls that I was able to find. One is the Fairleigh Dickinson poll, which is a university in New Jersey, which has Menendez ahead by 4 points, but this is where the poll gets weird. He's ahead by 4 points, 28 to 24, with their poll coming up with 46% of voters being undecided just a couple of months from the election. That seems really bizarre to me. I feel like there was something about the way that they were asking a question in that poll that made it not come out the same as traditional polls do, because that's just so dramatically different from the undecided margin in the other polls in the area. It's massively different. It is worlds different. So I kind of throw out the information from that poll, even though at the end of the day, having Menendez up by 4 points is right in between the two reliable polls. I just don't trust the poll because of that weird undecided number. Now, the last poll I found was the Monmouth poll. And this poll shows Menendez being up 21 points, which, again, that is a difference of 15 points to the nearest other poll to it. So again, I threw that out as being outlier data. Also something to consider, and maybe kind of a sign of what I was talking about with the poll lead for the Democrat shrinking. That was the oldest of these polls, so it is possible that he had more of a lead back when that poll was conducted, but even then, I don't see it changing that much between when this poll was conducted and when all the other polls were conducted, so I think there's a little bit of jankiness at play there. So as for the two polls that I consider reliable, they show the Democratic candidate ahead by 6 and 2 points, with an aggregated score of about 4 points. Now, the News' total aggregate score puts the Democrat ahead by 6 points. Either way, he is ahead, but not by a whole lot, and not nearly by as much as he was a few months back. Now, here's the question. It is clear that Bob Hugin is closing the gap with Robert Menendez. It is clear that he is alive and in this race due to the suspicions of corruption and the corruption trial of Robert Menendez. But the question is whether or not this momentum shift is going to be enough to carry him into the lead and eventually into victory come election day. Now, the last thing that I want to look at here before I give you my opinion on that is what the kind of overall policy of these two guys is, other than the issue of Robert Menendez saying, "I'm not corrupt, I'm the incumbent," and Bob Hugin saying, "He is corrupt, vote for me instead." In the case of Menendez, he is kind of on the platform of the fact that he is protecting New Jersey from Trump's policy. And I also wrote in the notes here, hoping voters forget the corruption charges. In the case of Bob Hugin, he is running on what I would call a Republican light policy. And hoping for swing votes due to his opponent's corruption charges. So what I mean by a Republican light policy is not necessarily that I think he's particularly more moderate than most Republicans, although he's definitely not one of the more extreme ones. What I mean is that his clearly right-leaning positions are kind of more toned down in his speeches and in his rhetoric and in his campaign ads. Kind of more focusing on the idea of his integrity and his opponent's lack of integrity, and less on the more divisive political issues that may cause left-leaning voters to go, "Oh, I'd rather have a corrupt politician than a Republican one." Which, again, there are people who legitimately do think like that, and they're not all Democrats. There are Republicans who think that way as well, and I think that's absurd, but, you're a registered voter, you're allowed to vote how you please. So at the end of the day, do I think that Bob Hugin is going to have the momentum to come from behind and win New Jersey? My answer is no. This is one of the races that I've been more confident on, that I've done an analysis for. When I was doing the analysis, I was kind of hoping that it would be a little bit more questionable, more interesting, but honestly, I think the story here is more the corruption case. I don't think that. I think that Hugin definitely has closed the margin, and I think he's run a great campaign, but I don't think that he really has much of a chance to win this race. I've teetered back and forth, but I've come to about the number. I give Robert Menendez a 77.5% chance of retaining his seat in this race. I would be more than happy just to see Menendez brought down to, winning this race by a half a point or a 1 point margin, because to me that would be enough to say that there are a lot of voters out there that even in a left-leaning state won't stand for corruption from their own party's politicians. And I do want to see that stuff more from both left and right-leaning politicians. Of course, there's other questions involved there, like what is slander from opposing media and stuff like that, and that's always something that we can talk about, but it's a topic for a complete another video. This race, I'm calling the incumbent Democrat Robert Menendez will most likely hold his seat. I'm calling it about a 77.5% chance. So that's it. You guys have a great night. I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you guys want to win a free $25 gift card for doing something super easy, don't forget to check the link out to that giveaway in the description. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.